Today, we are going to do the Principles of Management Part 1. Now, what are we going to study in this? In this, we are going to understand the concept of principles of management and also the significance of the principles of management. This is Chapter 2. Now, what are the principles of management? Now, they're just broad guidelines. I would like to compare the principles of management with that of a calculator. Suppose you want to do some calculation. So you can always use a calculator. You can press a few buttons and there you have your answer. But suppose you press a wrong button, then your answer will be wrong. Similarly, the principles are also mere guidelines. They're just guidelines for the manager to use, but he has to use his own discretion also. He has to see which principle to apply where. And if he applies the wrong principle, then the result will also be wrong. So principles are just guidelines. But while we are studying what principles are, let us distinguish between principles, techniques, and values. Now, techniques are methods, method of doing a particular job. And principles are guidelines to take decision. So when the manager has to take a decision, he falls back on the principles that he has studied. Similarly, values. Values are something that is acceptable by the society and they have moral connotations. So different societies have different values. In India, we have a little conservative society. So these are the values which are very close to us. And the principles are the basic truth or guidelines to behavior. So these are the differences between them. They could be asked for a 1-mark question. Now let us distinguish between the principles of science and that of management. Now, the principles of science are very rigid. If whatever the answer is, it will always be the same. For example, if water boils at 100 degrees, it will always boil at 100 degrees and freeze at 0 degrees, keeping other things constant. But management principles are flexible because they're dealing with human beings. Second, creativity. There's no creativity in scientific principles, whereas there's a lot of creativity in management principles because the manager applies the principle according to what he feels right, and he can always, they're flexible and he can bring about a little bit of creativity in them. And then the outcome, in case of science, the outcome will always be the same, whereas in case of management, the outcome is not the same because management principles are based on human beings and no two human beings are the same. Therefore, the outcome of management principles is not the same. Now, nature of principles of management, let us study them one by one. The first is universal applicability. Management principles are universally applicable. They are not universally valid, but they're universally applicable. That means they can be applied to all form of business organization, whether it is business or non-business, whether it is big or small, whether it is public or private, every type of organization, the principles can be applied. But the degree of the application keeps on differing. Like, for example, division of work. A small organization, what will he divide? He will not be able to use division of work to that extent as much as a big organization. So the principles are universally applicable. Then they're mere guidelines. They're just general guidelines. If something goes wrong, you cannot say I applied this principle and the result was not the same. They're just guidelines. So principles are guidelines to action, what is to be done and what is not to be done. They are not ready-made straitjacket solutions. Solution nahi hai. It's not like science principles. बुखार है तो क्रोसिन दे दो. So they are not ready-made. They are ready-made nahi hai wo. You have to tailor it according to a requirement. Why? Why is it so? Because real business situations are not the same and they're very complex and they keep on changing. That is why they are just guidelines. Then they're formed by practice and experimentation. Just like scientific principles, you have to keep on experimenting, conducting experiment, then wisdom, collective wisdom of all the managers who have been there before you, and experience. So observation, experimentation, and experience is the basis on which the management principles are formed. One of the examples that can be used is that of discipline. Everybody knows that if discipline is not there in an organization, then the objectives can't be achieved. So just by the experience of the old managers, this principle was formed. Then comes flexible. Now, you know that management principles are mere guidelines. That means they can be changed according to the situation. They are not rigid prescriptions. They are quite flexible. There's a lot of scope for the manager's discretion. And why? Because the situations may change and new situation may demand another type of principle. Like, for example, centralization and decentralization. You cannot say that all organizations should be centralized or all should be decentralized. So some organizations are more centralized, some are more decentralized. Why? Because of the principle are flexible. The principles are flexible, therefore this principle could be made. Then they're mainly behavioral. Management principles are aimed at influencing the behavior of the people who are working in the organization. If the behavior of the people does not change, then what is the point in applying that principle? I'll give you an example here. Once a mother wanted a child to get some sugar from the market, and the child was not going, and he was not even doing anything. He was just dilly-dallying. So the mother said, okay, that cricket ball that you were saying you wanted to get, you go and get that also. And the child went like this and came back. She didn't know when he went and when he came back, because now motivation had been added. And therefore, the behavior of the child changed. So when you apply the principle, it should actually change the behavior of the human beings who are working there. And the management principles, they establish an understanding between human and material resources that are there in the organization. It's not that management principles are only dealing with human beings, but the emphasis is more on human beings. Then cause and effect relationship. There has to be a cause and effect relationship always. Now, what is cause and effect relationship? Understand this very carefully because it's quite often asked in the board exam. Now, I'll start with a scientific principle. Let us say you've got fever. Fever is not a disease. Fever is a symptom of a disease. So you go to the doctor. Now, doctor has to establish as to what is the cause of that fever. So he will see whether he'll get some battery of tests done and he'll decide that, okay, you've got viral. So he established the cause. Now, once he comes to know that this is viral fever, he'll give you medicine for that. And then he'll tell you to come after 3 days. He will see that the effect of the medicine that he's given you, was it good? Was it required? Was it sufficient? Then only he will say, okay, now you can stop it. So normally what happens when we go to the doctor, he gives us medicines for 3 days or 5 days, and then we're okay. We never bother to go again, but we should. So what is the doctor doing? He's establishing the cause and effect relationship. So in every principle, you have to establish the cause and effect relationship. Similarly, in management also. So first of all, the manager tries to find out what is the cause. Let us say the workers are threatening to go on strike. So he sees what is the cause. He has to find out the cause. If he doesn't find out the cause and he applies a principle, then it may go wrong. So he identifies the cause. And this is the reason why they are threatening to go on a strike. Then he sees, no, what should I do? Which principle should I apply? Then he applies the principle and he sees whether they're coming back or not, or has the strike intensified. So he has to study the cause and effect relationship. So that the principles can be used in similar situations in a large number of cases. So if he studies the cause and effect relationship every time, so the same principle can be modified a little bit and can be used in a large number of cases, because real situations are actually quite different. No two real situations are the same. But in case of an emergency, like an emergency comes as hardly any time, then in that case, you just follow whatever others are doing. You don't have to be innovative about it. But when you're thinking of doing something new, suppose a new project is to be started, then you must consult a large number of people and then take a decision. So cause and effect relationship should always be studied before any decision is taken. Then comes contingent. Management principles are contingent. Contingent means it depends upon the prevailing situation. So you apply the principle according to what the situation is, and no two situations are same. So we have to keep that in mind. Now, for example, the workers, they want more salary. Suppose there's a person who has done MBA from IIM. Now he says, I've done from IIM, so I need higher salary. But he's working in an organization where they cannot pay him that salary. So the principle should be contingent, says that the salary of the employer should be according to the paying capacity of the employer. So giving a good salary and a fair salary is right. You should ask for a fair salary, but you should keep in mind the work that you're doing and the paying capacity of the employer, the prevailing wage conditions during that time, etc., a number of other things. So this is why they say management principles are contingent. Contingent means depending upon the prevailing situation. Now come to the significance of principles of management. Just to brighten it up a little bit, variety has been added. So there are 6 significance or importance. Let's do them one by one. Providing managers with useful insight into reality. Now, there's a lot of difference between theory and practical. So the real life situations are actually very different from what you have studied. So with the help of the principles, a little bit of help can be added to the manager. His knowledge, ability of understanding the situations can be increased a little bit. Like, for example, you're going to a foreign country. Don't you read about that country a little bit, about the rules and what food is available, how do you communicate, what is the language, all that you find out. Similarly, the manager who has knowledge about the principles of management, he can use it to increase his knowledge, and therefore he can learn from the past mistakes of other managers and increase his efficiency. So one such principle is delegation of authority. So delegation of authority says that you don't have to do everything yourself. You can pass on some routine work to your subordinates, and only the main areas can be looked after you. So the first significance is providing managers with useful insight into reality. Then optimum utilization of resources and effective administration. Now these are very pretty long headings, but still you have to learn them. So the resources are limited. Even if it's a big organization, the resources are always limited. And it is the job of the manager to see how he can get the maximum benefit with minimum cost. And for that, he has to see the cause and effect relationship. Remember, we have already done that. And so that he reduces the wastage and avoids trial and error. So when he has the knowledge of principles of management, then there's no trial and error. He's not trying it for the first time. Others have already tried it, and now he's learned from their mistakes, and he's going to implement keeping that in mind. The third is scientific decision. So another importance of the principles of management is that it helps the manager take a more scientific decision. Now at the top, it is very lonely. There's probably only one person at the top, and they may be having a board of directors, but then for every decision that you need to take, you're consulting the middle level. Then the middle level will say, why are you at the top? Why are we not at the top? Isn't it? So the manager has to take the decisions all by himself. But if he has got the backing of the principles of management, then these decisions are more thoughtful and justifiable and to serve the purposes. So the decisions that he takes, they have to be right, and they have to be timely. He has to take the decisions on time. They should be realistic and subject to measurement. So all this can be done only when he bases his decisions on the principles of management. And when he bases his decisions on the principles of management, they are free from bias and prejudice also. Then meeting changing environment requirements. Now the environment is changing, but what is worrying is that it is changing at a very fast pace, and therefore the manager has to keep himself updated with the changing environment. So to keep himself updated, he has to have the basic knowledge about the principles of management. For example, one of the principles of management is division of work, that divide the work amongst people. Now, division of work can now be extended to outsourcing your work, BPO, business process outsourcing. So getting your work done from outside. So you can only look after the core activities, and non-core activities can be outsourced. So with the help of the principles of management, the manager is able to meet the changing environment requirements. Then fulfilling social responsibility. Now, nowadays, the consumers are very aware. They're aware of the rights, the responsibilities, and they make sure that the businessman also fulfills his part of the social responsibility. And so ever since this evolution, management principles have evolved and they've gained new meanings. New principles have also been added. Now let us talk about one such principle like equity. When equity was first formulated, equity actually meant that for the same job, men and women should be paid the same. But now the meaning of equity has changed. It means value to the customer, care of environment. Everything should be treated as equal. And dealing with the business associate, they should also be given equal opportunity and equal status, etc. So fulfilling social responsibility, the managers are aware of it only when they study the management principles. So BHEL, that is a public sector undertaking, they have set up an entire township in Ranipur that as a part of their social responsibility. Then management training, education and research. Now management principles are, some of them are becoming outdated, redundant, and they are being changed. New principles are coming in. And when a new manager is studying, let us say, going in for MBA, etc., then they're studying the new concepts. And there the managers are asked which principle is very difficult, which new thing is very difficult to apply in real life. And therefore, new principles are being developed. This is another importance of management principles, because the principles, they form the main theory of studying management as a discipline. And new principles that are coming up now are operation research, just-in-time management, means you don't have to stock huge amount of goods, just in time. Kanban means where the new stock is required. Then Kaizen means constant improvement. Six Sigma means reduced quality variations. Don't have too many qualities of one particular product. Keep the quality variation to the minimum. So this is yet another significance of management principles, because it helps in training, education, research of the new managers and also the existing managers. And with that, we come to the case study, and this came in 2017 compartment. And you have to see one of the points relates to the nature of management principles that is being highlighted. Okay, nature of management principle. Let's see which one are they talking about and explain any other 3 points. Okay. Rima is one of the most successful managers of a company, Globe Limited. She knows that the principles of management are intended to apply to all types of organizations, business as well as non-business, small as well as large, public sector as well as private sector. So now that we know the question, we can see what the answer is, but I'll give you a moment to recollect what we have studied. Yes, then I'll share the answer with you. And the answer is it applies to all types of organizations, business as well as non-business, small and large. And what is your answer? It is universal applicability. Management principles are universally applicable. And they'd also asked for 3 more points. So that is any 3 you could have written, but I've tried to pick up the smallest ones. You could do that. But you must remember, children, if there's any confusion regarding the point that's been asked, then see that when you are answering the other 3 points, it should not be similar to that. Try to use a variation in that, so that in case you get the answer wrong, the main answer is wrong, A part is wrong, then at least you're not repeating the same point again in B. So that's all in this video. Thank you.